Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, February 23rd. Thanks so much for joining me. We're going to have a special broadcast today. We haven't done this in a while, but we're going to do a lightning round, a surprise. Didn't want to plan it ahead of time, didn't want anybody to come in thinking that was the case, but I wanted to reward everybody who is here already, because it is fun to do it this way. So what we're going to do is, if you would like to have a poem critiqued right now, like something you're working on or anything you've got, email it to a new email address I just made up, and it's only for this purpose. We're not going to use it for anything else, just to keep everything separate. Email it to cotw@rattle.com. That's COTW for critique of the week at rattle.com. So let's see here. I'll put it in the chat window. COTW@rattle.com. So email it there, and we're going to have, as you probably know if you watch the Rattlecast, this week's prompt is to take an old poem and change the perspective a little bit and revise it into something new. And so we're going to take a little bit of an extra look at that, of how we can revise poems, changing the perspective. What can we change about it to make the poem maybe more successful? We're going to take a look at it a little bit more in that direction as we look at the poems today. So email your poems there, and then we'll show them on screen and talk about them as you do. So that's your fair warning. You got it there. Let me put it in the Facebook too. COTW@rattle.com. Also, I hope the audio sounds good. I've decided that since over in the Texas house, we don't have the boom arm thing. And I thought maybe I like it better actually without the stuff, even though it's sort of like a little security blanket to be able to hide behind the microphone. But it is kind of nice to be free. So I thought we'd switch that. But if the audio is any problems, let me know that too. But let's see who we've got in the house. So over on Facebook, we've got Jenny Middleton, Radislav Stoyanov, we've got Tara Mesalis McMahon, a whole bunch of people over on YouTube. Jeremiah Underwood's here, Brian O'Sullivan, Mark Grinier, Steve Harrell, Aaron Sickler, Gary Rawson, Morgan Feeney, D. Coleman, Morgan Feeney again, sorry, Jerry Stephenson, Jerry Stephenson, Tom Barlow's here, Monica Dobos, Cindy Guntherman, James Spencer, Caitlin Clark, Morgan Feeney, Monica Dobos, did I say that? Katie Dozier in the room next door. We got Ethne Longbottom. We got Lisa Seidenberg, Mary Keating. Yeah, so looking good. Great crowd. Dick Westheimer's here. Hey, Dick. Nate Jacob is here. Yeah, great crowd of people. So if anybody would like to, once again, email, or get to as many as we can in the next hour, but email your poem right now to COTW@rattle.com, and we will check it out. So, let's see. So I thought we'd start it that way while everybody's getting that going. I would start out, and let me pull this up to COTW, see if we got any emails. Yeah, alrighty, that doesn't take long. Deb Tenenbaum and Mary Keating already have them up. So there we go. Okay, so I got two already, but we'll get to as many as we can. But I was looking for old poems to do to myself for the Rattlecast prompt that Katie came up with this week. And I was looking at the oldest poems I could find, and I thought I'd lost a whole lot of poems because transitioning computer to computer. There's a file that used to be like poems, like completed poems. It was gone a long time ago, and I thought I had poems that were just lost forever. And then looking through to see the oldest poems I could find, I found, and I'm not going to show it, it still has my mom's address on top, so I copied and pasted. But I have some old submissions I found from 2004, almost 20 years ago exactly. And there's some poems that I hadn't seen in 20 years in this file. And so I thought I looked for the ones I didn't recognize. I'm going to read two of the poems of my own that I don't recognize whatsoever. And I'll pick one of the two to critique, maybe talk a little bit about, or to revise for the prompt lines on on Monday and talk about what I might do, and we'll see how that goes, and then we'll get to yours. We got the poems are flying in. For some reason, the autoresponder is bouncing, so that's interesting. I don't know what's going on there. We'll just end now. There's no vacation response anymore. But if you send to cotw@rattle.com, your poem might be shown on the air. That's the risk of doing it, and that's the point, of course, but just so you know. All right, so let's take a look at this. This is actually fun to see. So this was the, interestingly, no date in my file, but there's a date for the date created, which was March 20th, 2004. And I pasted the content in here so I wouldn't dox my own mother, but because she still lives in the same house she did 20 years ago. Hey, Mom. And here is the file. This is what I wrote. This is my cover letter to Mid-American Review. So, dear poetry editors, for some reason I didn't mention Karen Crago by name, even though I addressed her in the body, so I don't know what I was thinking in 2004. I recently received a rejection for my last set of submissions, but I'm still fond of your magazine, and you seem like very friendly people. Thank you very much for an extra copy you added to my subscription, Karen. I really enjoyed it, so I'm sending you a pair of brand new pieces, hoping you'll like them more. So I'm still a recent graduate of the University of Rochester, assistant poetry editor, which I'd run for like 1 month at Rattle. Works appeared recently are forthcoming in Rattle, The Wolf Poetry, Trist, Stirring, and a bunch of others. Thank you very much for your consideration and dedication. Best wishes, Tim. And then you'll see, enclosed it says it has these 2 poems, but these are not actually, there are other poems included too, so that was a mistake. And also, it's funny too, when I was looking at Katie Dozier's cover letter, I suggested it was a little too Rattle heavy, because she's like, I was an editor, I was a prompt lines editor for Rattle, and works coming in Rattle. And look, I did the exact same thing 20 years ago too. So I would advise myself to delete that Rattle there from the cover letter. But the interesting thing is, they ended up publishing The Body, which you can find in American Fractal. It was one of the poems in here. This Wherever Things Go. And to be honest, I had Katie read these to tell me which ones I should consider. So she said Wherever Things Go is good and I shouldn't change. But then there are other poems that were included too in this submission. And but Wherever Things Go is like a poem apparently that's good, according to Katie. I haven't read it yet. But she says it was good and I should keep it. But I hadn't seen it in 20 years. And The Body is in my first book. And then there's other poems too, though. There's this, which is this form that I like to write. I call them a train poem. And there's and then there's Any Surface. So we'll look at these and see how we can revive these. Okay. So here's the first poem, and this is Tim Green from 2004. Let me get it all on one page. This is the title, apparently. So I don't know. I'm looking at this like I would as an editor 20 years later. This. And as I said, back in the day, you would print these out and then mail them in a like with a letter in an envelope. Yeah. So anyway, this is apparently. This patterned silence, ringlets of it, hum of a small fan, fingers at the keys, then silence, pause, then clatter, pause, clatter. You could never write the silence of this hope now, throw the light switch on, world still soft with adjusting, dilation meaning love they told you in school and you believed it, looked for it even, the slivered iris, the take it all in, never enough in the mirror, out the window, and the perfect half light to see a street, a world, and you in it, filtered with it, groping for belonging, you looked for this sheen, this way of moving without letting go, headlights enter your reflection, tail lights, a tree in pantomime, silence broken for a moment, but now back again, and you wonder if it could have never ever been broken, if such a thing were possible in this. And it's fear, what holds you here, eyes locked in their own gaze, questioning, waiting for an answer and seeing an answer, waiting still. Well, that's interesting. I vaguely remember like one line from this poem. Let's see what the other one is, and then we'll just talk about one or the other. This is, did I miss a line? Waiting still, never satisfied. Oops, I screwed that up. I thought maybe there we go. Okay. Now let's see what the other one is. And we'll pick one to talk about. And then we'll get to your poems. And whichever one we pick, I'll try to revise for on Monday. Any Surface. They line up to trade cigarettes, look at their feet. In the cold they rub their hands as if to start a fire. But what is fire under any surface? A long window sneaks up from behind to frame their backs like domino, so easy to topple. A gust of wind or the exhaust of a car driving by is all it takes. Too early for traffic, though, and they've all walked to work. They line up to trade cigarettes, look at their feet. In the cold, they light matches with their teeth. The windows sneaking up frame their backs like dominoes, so easy to topple. The sky flares gold, turns them black. Too early for traffic, though. They line up to trade cigarettes, look at their feet. In the cold, their hands could start a fire. What fire? Windows frame their backs, but who looks back? Under any surface, even glass. They line up to trade hands, look at nothing. The sky flares gold, dominoes. A woman, and she's beautiful. Her soul out of nothing sleeps on sand. Well, that's interesting. Any surface. I don't remember this at all, but I know what it's about, which is interesting, too. And actually, I wrote a couple poems recently for the prompt lines about this experience I had. I worked for a temp, like a day labor place, during college in the summer break once, where while I was waiting for like a different job that paid more, I just showed up. You show up at like 7 a.m. What are they called? Labor ready, I think. And so people all line up, and mostly, people, I don't know. I mean, people struggling and people just trying to get drugs, money. And so we're sort of lining up, waiting for jobs. And that was, there was a poem about, I think it was after work, something about work that we did in the Rattlecast recently. Anyway, this is the same thing. This is that line of people. And there was I remember very vividly memory, there's a prostitute sleeping in the grass and the sand, apparently. In my head, it's grass, though. But anyway, next to the sidewalk. Anyway, that is that one. I wonder which one. I think the other one maybe works better, because the prompt is to change the perspective. And I think this one of the things I always talk about on the Rattle shows is, or on the Critique of the Week, is that you poem where you don't know who the you is. This is a very self-referential you. And I think it might be better shifting it from the you, the second person, to a first or a third. So maybe that's the way to go. Let me look at it a little more closely and see what else we can talk about here. And then I'll work on this poem tomorrow. Although there's really not much substance to it, though, either. It's sort of me sitting at a computer, apparently. So this pattern silence. So I like the rhythm of the poem. This pattern silence, ringlets of it, hum of a small fan, fingers at the keys, then silence. Pause, then clatter, pause, clatter. You could never write the silence of this. And then, so that, I like the beginning. This hope, or this... I repeat that this maybe a little melodramatically too much. I was young, what can I say? This hope now, throw the light switch on, world still soft with adjusting, dilation meaning love, they told you in school and you believed it, looked for it even, the slivered iris, the take it all in, never enough in the mirror out the window and the perfect half light to see a street, a world, and you in it, filtered with it, groping for belonging, you looked for. See, I like this part. This sheen, this way of moving without letting go, headlights enter your reflection, tail lights, a tree in pantomime, silence broken for a moment, but now back again, and you wonder if it could have ever been broken, if such a thing were possible in this. And this is what I don't like. So I think this felt like a wrong turn in the poem when I was reading it the first time. Yeah. So it's fear, is a very, like, I don't know, kind of heavy-handed turn to a narrative, and maybe it's better to dive back into the image. So maybe that's what I'll do for the prompt this week. Yeah. Let's see what everyone's saying. If you have any advice for me on this poem, I'm really not sure what to do with either of these, to be honest. Yeah. So Mary Keating says you could write the second one from the perspective of the prostitute. That's a really interesting idea. The thing is, the truth is, I don't really revise much. I either abandon poems. I could imagine like writing a new one completely, and maybe that's revision too. Yeah, Katie Dozier says it feels like it needs to turn, and I think she's talking about this. I think it too, and the title is really weak too. I mean, even though that's a repetition that moves through, it doesn't give you anything to go on. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, I think this one has a lot of potential for revising, shifting the you, possibly, and then not going into this abstract sort of moralizing here. Yeah, waiting still, never satisfied. Yeah, I wonder what I can enter there. I can think of myself back I wrote all these poems. At the time, I worked on night shifts at a group home for mentally ill adults. And every night pretty much, if there wasn't some kind of emergency, it was just such a great job for a writer. Everybody would go to sleep, and as long as nothing happened in the middle of the night, I'd have from like 1 a.m. until like 5 a.m. when people started waking up to just do kind of whatever. There was some like little work to do, and I just wrote poems all the time. And so this is me sitting there in that office. So maybe I'll go back to that place. Yeah. Katie Order says, too bad you didn't have the Poetry Spaces episode on titles 20 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, Morgan Phoenix says the spacing feels a bit self-indulgent and undisciplined. It does. I have these poems I call train poems, but this really isn't it, because I move in the lines a lot more. And it makes you wonder why, why certain choices are made. Whereas when, if you see let's see. So the other form, which is more typical. This is the body. Oh, this is interesting too, by the way. This is that poem that Mid-American Review published, and so there the lines are all the same length, so you don't have any thought about it. There was an epigram which I don't even remember having at one point, and I don't think I included it when I published it in Mid-American Review. But anyway, so that gives me something to think on. I'm not sure. This is a little harder than I thought. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff I could clutter, but to shift perspective, there's two options there for me. So you'll see what I come up with on Monday if you join the Rattlecast and in the prompt lines. Let me see what other people say before we move on. Keto says, it's interesting how it sounds like Tim and not Tim. Yeah, 20 years, we're slightly different people, for sure. Or maybe significantly different people. D. Coleman says the second one sounds like Ghazal-like. Or guzzle-like with the repetition of lines. Maybe I write that as a guzzle. That's a really interesting idea, D. Thanks so much. Yeah. Dick Westheimer says both of these feel a bit cagey, like there is something that wants to emerge from the poem that you are not quite ready to reveal. Yeah, too. Yeah, well, maybe I'll try them both. Yeah. Tom Brown says, try making one a haiku. That is a good suggestion, actually, for the prompt lines. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's move on, and we'll see. It gives me some ideas, and we'll see what we have to go with. But let's go on to people who shared poems. And we have a whole bunch, so let's just roll quickly as quickly as we can. I'll put this up over here. Put this up here. And here is Deb Tenenbaum's poem, The End of the River Is Not Found. So we'll see what we can suggest to do with this. And again, we're suggesting a direction you might go for this week's prompt lines. In addition to talking a little bit about what we might change too, as far as sort of the line ending that we usually do. We're looking at the more big picture this time with what we send in here. So let's see what Deb has for us. The end of the river is not found. 7 stray dogs are up for adoption. The one called Seriously Quiet looks like a young man, so human. I sit beside him on the riverbank. He's lanky, wearing a long-sleeved cotton shirt, muddied jeans, barefoot. I ask, are you a dog or a person? Strands of auburn hair curtain his brown eyes. I am petting his shoulder, believing he is a pup, the right one for me. Eyes downcast, he shrugs away from my touch, sneaks a sidelong glance, scratches behind his ear, and says, I don't know. Our bodies keep close, the river flows, the other dogs swim and play. He rests one delicate paw against my breast. I sigh and ease it aside. The current stays. Well, that's interesting. Well, already, as I think Mary Keating suggested for me, what about changing the perspective to the prostitute in that poem at the very end? What about changing from the dog's perspective here? I'm one of 7 lined up for adoption, and start the poem out that way. That might be a really interesting thing to go. And you can tell this is from the prompt before. The end of blank is not blank. Remember that? So the end of the river is not found. So I really like the title a lot. I wouldn't change that. Hopefully, try to work it in that way. 7 stray dogs are up for adoption. The one is called Seriously Quiet, looks like a young man, so human. I really like the beginning of this poem too. There's it's an interesting title, and then we jump to something completely different that we don't expect based on the title, which makes for it's a stimulating type leap there, and you sort of wonder, almost like a cliffhanger, like how is this title going to wrap around? What's a river have to do with the dogs? The one called Seriously Quiet looks like a young man, so human, and I think you can really see that, I think, so that really works. I sit beside him on the riverbank. He's lanky. So all of a sudden we're on a riverbank, and I'm a little confused about why. There's the fact there's like an adoption clinic, like an adoption thing in the river, by a riverbank in a park, maybe. You've seen pet adoption. What do they call them? Fairs. So maybe that's what it is. He's lanky, wearing a long sleeve cotton shirt, muddy jeans, barefoot. I ask, "Are you a dog or a person?" Strands of auburn hair curtain his brown eyes. I am petting his shoulder, believing he is a pup, the right one for me. So a really interesting, shift there to this sort of surreal, where we don't really know where to put it, which I really like that a lot too. Eyes downcast, he shrugs away from my touch, sneaks a sidelong glance, scratches behind his ear, and says, "I don't know." Our bodies keep close. The river flows. The other dogs swim and play. He rests one delicate paw against my breast. I sigh and ease it aside. The current stays. I really love the way that the river flows sort of in the background of this poem. And there's a surreal nature where I don't know, it's tough for me to, I really like it. Yeah. So Brian O'Sullivan says, Katie, for the prompt, is it okay to revise from memory a poem that we don't physically have anymore? And Katie says, yes, please just note what you remember about it in the cover letter with your sub. Yeah, we want to make sure that people are actually revising poems, or else it's not going to be it's fun. So Dick Westheimer says, little craft suggestion, cut away from the ninth line. Away from the ninth line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh. Eyes downcast, he shrugs away from my touch. Yeah, the shrugs away is sort of implied and unnecessary, so a bit cluttery. Yeah, so this is an interesting one, because I kind of like it. It's hard for me to think about what to change, because I like the surreal nature. I like the fact that I don't really know what's going on. You can imagine it really easily as sort of a metaphor, but it is a metaphor for dating and meeting people like that. You're sort of adopting a partner to go on and I think that aspect is interesting. Yeah, so Deb T said I sent was out the idea of shifting perspective just for a generic critique. And yeah, for that, I don't know. I think the thing that makes it so wearing long sleeve cotton shirt and muddy jeans, the muddy jeans really makes it sort of feel like more human, so we know which one is the more real one. He actually is human. I think maybe leaving that detail out, because a dog could wear a cotton shirt. You see people like that, but they couldn't wear pants. As Dick Westheimer says, though, can't see what you're going to revise it. It feels complete. It does to me. And I like the surreal nature. I like that what it's talking about without talking about it directly. It stimulates a lot of thought. I think it's just a pretty good poem. So don't have a lot to say about this one, Deb. You're too good. Let's take a look at another poem so we can move on quickly. And Deb, if you want to send another one, Deb says, could have sent one I really like to shift perspective on. If you want to, when we get to it, feel free to send that now. We might. I'm trying to move fast. So it was Deb Tenenbaum. Let's go next to Mary Keating, who was quick too. This is Culinary Pop Art. And did Mary say anything about it? Let's see. No. Just, well, it was so quick. There's no time to say anything. Here we go. Culinary Pop Art. This is our own Mary Keating, of course. Culinary Pop Art. I'd paint death in muted colors, pastels falling into a gray fog, blurring smells of soggy noodles, forgetting cheerful yellows, daffodils against verdant greens, but not your last days steeped in lemonade. The world no longer brightened by the upward curve of your apple-red mouth that devoured life like fresh popcorn. Turquoise and cerulean seas muddied now, and your eyes once shimmering like butter melted over homemade bread. The crisp outline of our future together, sure as oil paint smelling of linseed, joined like linzer tarts baking in the oven. Ripped apart and to be consumed alone, memories like crumbs swallowed by the brain's swirling crevices. Well, that's interesting. Culinary pop art. So first of all, the title I like a lot. Another interesting title. We're getting really good at that for sure. I'd paint death in muted colors. One of the things that I think for some reason here, I was thinking about a refrain of that I'd paint death in muted colors. And maybe even making this into like a pantoum where that's, in a pantoum, the first line ends up being the last line usually. And, the first and third become the second and fourth, or is it the other way around? I think it must be that way. Or maybe not. Which comes first? Whatever. But I feel like, but some kind of repetition would be nice to sort of hold the poem together a little bit. And Dick Weistheimer says too, to me this would benefit from more specific images. But let's read it again a little more closely, because to me, just reading it first, I kind of felt like it wanted a little bit more repetition. And something to sort of like tie it into a tighter knot. Culinary pop art. I paint death in muted colors, pastels falling into a gray fog, blurring smells of soggy noodles. Can't you see like the repetition of that, like what you'd be painting, or maybe even shifting, what you'd be painting. I'd paint life in this, in this way, and kind of move through lists where you're sort of shifting. Katie says, I really like this mashup of food and colors and smells. I would break out of tercets here. I think in jamming and playing the line breaks could make this even stronger. Such as, but not your last days steeped in lemonade. I think maybe that's why I was thinking about, actually, because there's not a lot of enjambment going on, I was thinking a lot about certain lines being refrains as I was reading, and that's why that came to mind. So I kind of like that idea of repeating, and maybe like sort of modifying as you go a little bit, or maybe not, but playing with that way. And maybe, too, since we have to shift the perspective, what maybe you instead of an I. Robin Delaba says, painting death in muted colors seems pretty predictable. Consider something more surprising. Well, the thing is, if you did that, you would be, in all the details surrounding it, you would be showing why that's not, that in interesting ways, I guess you'd say. PMB says, Paul Mitchell Bernstein says, I am death painted in muted colors, like that, so make it more direct. That's an interesting idea. Yeah. Well, let's look at it a little more closely. Keep going. So I like the the blurring smells of soggy noodles, forgetting cheerful yellows, daffodils against verdant greens, not your last days steeped in lemonade. So I think the daffodils and the verdant greens and the cheerful yellows, it's a little bit less interesting. I like your last days steeped in lemonade. That's the kind of specificity I think Dick was calling for more of. And I agree with that. So these kind of lines are the ones to kind of stay. The world no longer brightened by the upward curve of your apple red mouth. And apple red is a little bit, not really cliche, but sort of a little bit that devoured life like fresh popcorn. The fresh popcorn is interesting too. But how can you expand that? Push that a little bit, like add an extra line, making that even more surprising as we go. Turquoise and cerulean seas. Cerulean is one of those words that I'd avoid. It's too poety. Seas muddied now in your eyes, once shimmering like butter. I like the once shimmering like butter over homemade bread. That's really nice too. Crisp outline of our future together, sure as oil paint smelling of linseed, joined like linzer tarts baking in the oven. I like that too. So when we get into these details where they're specific, linzer tarts baking in the oven, I like that. So more of that. Ripped apart to be consumed alone, memories like crumbs swallowed by the brain's swirling crevices. And I think maybe the brain's swirling crevices, like crumbs swallowed into crevices is interesting, but the brain is a little too abstract, I'd say, maybe. Yeah, so... Yes, so for me, what I do, I really like the idea of adding some repetition in this. And making it, I like the pantoum. I think I'd maybe suggest trying that. It might open up. I sense the poem would flower out that way. Yeah. Carolina says, Tim, cerulean, too poety, and it is a poem, LOL. Well, the thing is, you don't want it to be a poem. You want it to be an experience. And if it's a poem, it's a words on a page. And you want to forget that you're reading a poem. You want to enter this sort of sacred space, And so anytime that you bring in things that remind you that a poet is writing a poem and sort of performing for you, it sort of breaks that fourth wall, and you lose that suspension of disbelief a little bit. Because the whole point of a poem is that it enters our body and we become the speaker, and we get to sort of live in that. It's almost like a virtual reality before there was any technology. Some people say poetry is the first technology, and it kind of was. The second. I wish we had the hand axe first. But anyway, yeah. So interesting. I think interesting ways we can see going for here. Mary, looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Let's go on to another poem. And next up we have, and I want to, how do I close this? It's like, give me 1 second, because this is a brand new, whatever, we won't bother. It's the new Google inbox. I can't remember how to take it off that, but next up is Joseph Radke. And we'll try to... Here, this one I'll take and I'll put into my little Word document so we can look at it a little better. Okay. Here we go. This is Joseph Radke. And we have... You must believe in spring. Just get a little smaller. Okay. You must believe in spring. Joseph Radke. Here we go. You must believe in spring. The blankness of winter has retreated, revealing not only the old grass greening, but debris of what was lost and survived. The gutter's empty trickle of snowmelt into rushing sewers, the discarded gloves and scarves and things that were trashed before they were covered have been picked up or washed away by the cold spring showers like this morning's steady drizzle. The light of what's left of the sun will have to do for daybreak. The windows stare at us vacantly or squint with half-pulled shades, and this will have to do for a world inside. Chipped fruit bowl in the center of a wobbly table surrounded by 3 unmatched chairs. The coffee maker perks and drips, answering the music of the radio. You pull off the blankets to startle me awake. This isn't our city, but we found ourselves living here. Found each other here among other things, such a bizarre scavenger hunt. We cast our hopes among the parking meters, late-running buses, and the strangers who touch but can't hold our fates. Here we share the moments, or are they mine alone? Just now, did you feel the thrill of a hard rain letting up, then coming on again? So my favorite part of this poem is the last stanza. And my suggestion, just right off the bat, this first hunch, is maybe start here. This isn't our city, but we found ourselves living here, and that offers a lot of opportunity to jump into description again. And I love the ending too, with "Did you feel the thrill of a hard rain letting up, then coming on again?" I like that the way that you sort of focus on the sound at the end. You can sort of hear it as the poem goes on. And so I think. My initial advice would be to use this as the first line and then focus more on the city. Yeah. So Fady said poem sprints, not allowing reader to keep up with images. That's interesting. Let's see. Yeah, Monica Doba says, love the images. I would play with a form. It feels a bit chunky. You must believe in spring. And so with a title... we wonder, it feels like it's a you sort of generalizing to just you, plural, you, anybody. One must believe in spring. And I think that, we talk about already in this episode, the weakness of the you, because it ends up, the ambiguity makes it weaker and it makes it less concrete. So I maybe consider a different title. The blankness of winter has retreated. And, in poems about winter and stuff, are sort of, it's been done a lot. And I think the poem just felt more fresh when it was talking about the city, which is why I think I would start there. I like the bizarre scavenger hunt, I wonder why. I wonder who these people are and why they found themselves living in the city. And I like that. Yeah, Morgan Feeney says, I don't know what city it is, but I want to. And James Spencer says the first 3 sentences felt like warming up. Discarded gloves feels like something specific to start on. So, So I mean, the poem, and maybe this beginning could be earlier, but that's the sense I got, that the poem was sort of spinning its wheels, not really sure what it was writing about until later. He suggests cutting these 3 and starting with the discarded gloves. The discarded gloves and scarves and things that were trashed before they were covered have been picked up or washed away by the cold spring showers like this morning's steady drizzle. I think maybe the cold spring showers, I'd cut off this thing. But I think you could see a poem where this isn't our city, but we found ourselves living here. The discarded gloves and scarves, or maybe we could be discarded like gloves. And you use the city that, what's that word that they, in high school, they always make you talk about from Thomas Hardy novels? It was like the scene is like telling the emotions. What was that called? There's some literary device that apparently that was like super, super important when you're in 8th grade. I can't even remember. But somebody who teaches literature can maybe tell me. It's not personification. It's like personification of the environment. What is that word? But anyway, using that, I could really see the poem like taking off in that way, because it's the details about the city, and the gloves, discarded things, the lampshades and things like that, that really come to life. And so I think I'd start here. Okay. Gary Rossin suggests perhaps use "This Isn't Our City" to introduce each stanza. That's an interesting idea too. Brian O'Sullivan says one way to rewrite this from a different perspective could be to switch positions. Make "You Must Not Believe in Spring," but do it ironically, with the narrator is only trying to give up on spring. Well, that's interesting too. Not anthropomorphism. What was that? There was a word. Oh gosh, what is that? Is anyone on Facebook helping me out? Let's see. What is it? Thomas Hardy using the environment. Like, I just remember like Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and it was like, the rain was being like the sadness of the town or whatever to build character. What is that called? Literary devices. Okay, let me see. Why can't I remember this thing? It might have been like one of those things where like my 8th grade English teacher, remembered that one thing from college and really fixated on it like it was important. I can't find it anywhere. Anyway. Yeah, nobody else can. Am I just making this up? Affective fallacy? Mise en scene? God, I don't think those are it. Pathetic fallacy? Those weren't it though. There was something. I'll look it up later. Maybe I'm just... I don't know, maybe it's the, let's see. Well, let's see. If pathetic fallacy is the attribution of human feelings and responses to inanimate things, especially in art and literature. Well, that works. That was a great description, but that's not the word that my 8th grade English teacher like made us write essays on over and over and over again. Anyway, we got to move on. I'll think of it and I'll tell everybody next time. Okay, let's move on though. Because I think we got some good suggestions here for again, that was Joseph Radke. So good suggestions for Joseph. Thanks for sharing those. Let's move on. So we I'd like to get to most people who sent stuff in if I can. James Spencer is up next, and he's got a things in bold or things I'm not sure about. So that's James Spencer. Good suggestions here. Let me just make it a little larger so you can see it a little more clearly. Okay, this is James Spencer. And again, a pantoum as the snowman. Yeah, see, it's not anthropomorphism. There's a word. Objective correlative. Joseph Radke's got it. Objective correlative. Yeah. And I've never used that word since like 8th grade. Yeah, so let me just make sure that's the right word. Objective correlative. The artistic and literary technique of representing or evoking a particular emotion by means of symbols that objectify that emotion associated with it. Yeah. So show a rainy day or a wilting flower to symbolize a character's sadness. That is, yeah, good job. Objective correlative. Thank you, Joseph Radke. Okay. So, Let's see. Back to this. Okay, so here's the Pantoum as the snowman. Pantoum as the snowman. And this is James Spencer's poem. Pantoum as the snowman. Thick-head night could not sleep. Air is chill, will not shine. Mind is dull, pelting sleet. Day's begun, almost 9. Wind so chill dulls my mind. More bark than bite, my flaky thought. Day's begun, it's only 9. Leaves decay to emotion caught. In verse bites, bark wordy gestures, chipped canines in a room of blocks from frosty drafts, torn in censure. Snowballed papers tick and tock. My nothing mind blows seriatim? Seriatim? That's a new word to me. Cool. My nothing mind blows seriatim. Derailed trains, arrested motion. To think and to feel, play the possum. Double glazed, my eye glints till frozen. Well, this one's interesting. Pantoum is the snowman. Yeah, that's a. So to me, I think that this one is missing a lot of, a lot of the articles in the natural language of speech, and I think you can see how the poem suffers for that. Unless you really have like the strong stilted voice is the voice of the narrator that really feels like there's a reason for doing that. It feels a little just off the whole time in a way that it makes it difficult to engage with the poem. So thick-head night could not sleep. Air, we have these like really, really short, blunt sentences. Air is chill, will not shine. Mind is dull, pelting sleet. Day's begun, almost 9. And that choppiness, I don't really hear the music coming out in that in a way that's compelling. So I would go back to think about the voice in this poem and maybe shift that to give the poem more of a voice. Because I like the details throughout the poem. So we'll point out of what works. Yeah, exactly. So Fadey says great skeleton of a poem without the flesh. And I think the flesh here is the voice. Like we could hear the snowman. And if you're going to have it like this stilted, choppy way of speaking, you could sort of push that even farther. I guess maybe the problem is it sort of has to go in one extreme or the other. Like we real cool, that Gwendolyn Brooks. That kind of where you can really hear the voice of the snowman as something strange and stilted like that, but it's not quite far enough in that direction. So I think I would pull in, So I think I would pull in more of regular speech and make us hear the voice a little better. Yeah, as Clayton Clark says, I think leaving some articles out isn't consistent, and that's the thing. So more consistency in one way or the other. I think you could push it in that way where it makes it for a really strong voice, but it's not quite there all the way, and so we don't get that voice the whole time. Yeah. So Pantoum is a snowman. Thick-head night could not sleep. Air is chill, will not shine. Mind is dull, pelting sleet. Day's begun, almost 9. Wind so chill dulls my mind. And so suddenly we get the my. And maybe that's where the inconsistency is. By adding suddenly a person where we'd sort of avoided using any kind of pronouns or subject in the poem. It was sort of these statements. All of a sudden we get the my in the second stanza. So that's one of the reasons maybe why it feels inconsistent, because it leaps from that to that. And also when you do that, it sort of... What is the Pantoum? Is it the first... The first and third lines become the second and fourth? Or is it the other way around? The second and fourth? Yeah, I guess it's the second and fourth become the first and third. Yeah. Right? Anyway. Thady says, I feel the poem is searching in the dark. Yeah. So to me, one of the things, too, I was going to say is that the Pantoum form where you're repeating lines, having those articles, they're things you can shift around, too, and sort of use the repetition in surprising ways. So, and I think that would help, too. And so I would lean, that's why I would lean toward that direction for it. So wind so chill, dulls my mind, more bark than bite. And I guess that's a cliche too, more bark than bite. My flaky thought, day's begun, it's only 9. Leaves decay to motion caught. And here I really wanted this to be enjambment, so you could sort of feel caught in something. But then inversive bites ends up being like a standalone too. Leaves decay to emotion caught, inversive bites, bark, wordy gestures. Chipped canines in a room of blocks, from frosty drafts torn in censure. Snowballed papers tick and tock. I like that line, snowballed papers tick and tock. My nothing mind blows... I want to look up that word too, because I don't know it. Seriatim. Taking one subject after another in regular order, point by point. Oh, okay. I like serial, but like seriatim. Like datum, but like serial. Okay, cool. New word. Derailed trains arrest motion. So we have the derailed trains too. And that's a leap in which doesn't really, I don't know where it's coming from. Fady says like the intro, but offers no climax. To think and to feel, play the possum, double glazed, eye glints till frozen. Yeah, to me, I mean, yeah, I think it starts out and then doesn't really figure out where it's going. Let's see any other comments. Yeah, so Jenny Middleton says, I think the choppiness sounds like sleet or snow striking land. I like that idea. And maybe that's an argument, too, for keeping the consistency in this direction, to push it more into this choppiness. And, and never bring up a my. And maybe that's the way to go. To let it be sort of not personified in a way where you expect it to be. That might be an interesting way to... to take the poem in a new direction. So maybe try that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. PMB says, why bold? And it's written right on top. Things in bold are things I'm not sure about. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's continue. But thanks for sharing this poem. Once again, that was James Spencer. And let's go next to Clayton Clark. Christmas Story with My Husband and Mother-in-Law. So that's a poem. Sounds like maybe a poem from the prompt lines not too long ago in December. Let's see what we got. This is Clayton Clark again. A Christmas Story with My Husband and Mother-in-Law. The lifeguards are nowhere. Red trunks smoothed in drawers, bare chests on the move. A warning has gone out that a storm is brewing. Headlines say, stay away, high surf, sneaker swells. We hear Mom's voice, but her tongue lays flat. All that rises, a mumble, a groan, legs gone numb. A stroke puts her in the hospital as run for your life waves burst into town, slosh over walls, make cars self-driving. Next morning, the storm is still wild. At the cove, death retches and spews his gangrene guts from the sea floor onto the cliff top, laden with pelicans and guano. These birds know how to keep people at bay with their ammonia drip. Smell it. Action paintings, the doctor says. It's the thalamus. Look, not good. Death leaps in his birthday suit, tongue wagging. Mom rolls her eyes. My husband smiles as she shoos death away, makes it clear she will not be licked by a reaper, not yet. Death obeys, slinks toward the door, chest concave. She can't wait to go home, says, I've been here long enough. Death spins, ignited. Again she flicks him away, but gently warns, careful of the waves, and sits up almost straight. A miracle. Still, it's a mystery what color trunks lifeguards wear in the off-season and where they go when they're gone. Yeah. Clayton Clark says, didn't know it was supposed to be from the prompt line. Sorry, no, not at all. I was just speculating based on the title. No, it could be anything you want to share. Aaron Stickler says, oh wait, this is for the last. If the second stanza was a pantoum, it wouldn't start Air's chill, will not shine. Yeah, for that last poem, it's true. I was confused about the structure. Yeah. Well, anyway. So, A Christmas Story. I like the way this weaves and braids the two topics together. So there's two sort of stories going on in parallel, which is always nice. The lifeguards are nowhere. Red trunks smoothed in drawers. I'm not sure starting with the lifeguards is the strongest. It might be sort of a false, false beginning where the poem was still trying to figure itself out, because the lifeguards don't really play a prominent role. Maybe the lifeguard towers are empty, but I think the lifeguards themselves end up thinking they're the subject of the poem when they're not at all. They never come up again. So I think maybe I'd shift that. A warning has gone out that a storm is brewing. I think a warning has gone out is unnecessary. A storm is brewing does enough. Headlines say, stay away, swells, or stay away, high surf, sneaker swells. And that's interesting. I've heard that phrase before. I guess that's surprise, like rogue wave type waves, I guess. Winston Munn says the first part is too much like reporting. It does. I mean, the thing is, the poem doesn't really get into gear. And I wonder, we hear Mom's voice, but her tongue lays flat. All that rises a mumble, a groan, legs gone numb. The poem, to me, seems like it starts coming alive here. I understand the impetus in wanting to weave these together. I think, the storm brewing and outside, and we, I like I said from the top, I like the braid of that, weaving through the two topics. And of course, you can look at the Barbara Hamby and David Kirby's style of poems on either their Rattlecasts for more poems like that, and more discussion of the way that braiding poems helps things come together in a emotional way. And I think it's a great instinct to use both of these. But I think this intro doesn't do it justice. The poem really picks up later. Keith Doder says, I know I say this too much, but with a reporting voice, I would love to see this as a Hyben. Deb T likes the Hyben idea too. D. Coleman says, keep the braiding, but start with a mother. It might be this. It might be start with a mother, but change the title. Because a Christmas story, I don't know if a Christmas story evokes the right thing. So what if it was, what if like the title was headlines say, stay away, high surf, sneaker swells? Like, what was that, the title? And then we jump in with the mom first. We hear Mom's voice, but her tongue lays flat. Because that's where the poem seems to take off to me. So maybe, cut all this and make this the title. Or something along those lines. A stroke puts her in the hospital. As a run for your life waves burst into town. Yeah. Mary Keating says the lifeguards are alluding to the literal lifeguards. Yeah, but so that's why I think the lifeguard towers would work. But the lifeguard, well, I guess the lifeguards are nowhere, and it doesn't, as the empty towers aren't the same thing. I know the poem just doesn't feel like it's like coming to life at that point. Yeah. Dick Westerman says, love that long title. Oh, so Mary Ellen Carr, thanks. I just love learning through poems. Wikipedia, Mary Ellen Carr looked this up. A sneaker wave can occur following a period of 10 to 20 minutes of gentle lapping waves. Upon arriving, a sneaker wave can surge more than 150 feet. Dang. Yeah. Okay. Death retches and spews his gangrene guts. I like I think personifying death, though, is a little bit sort of tired. But I love the ocean retching and spewing its gangrene guts. When we get to gangrene, we get the death in there anyway. And calling that, the seaweed and stuff that's like sort of vomited up after a huge wave, calling that gangrene guts from the seafloor, I think that's great. But I don't know if personifying so much as death works as well. I think that weakens it a little bit. So I think maybe weaving back and forth between the description of the really interesting descriptions, weaving back and forth between that and the scene that's going on inside with the mom. I think that's a nice thing. Yeah. Death obeys, slinks toward the door, chest concave. She can't wait to go home. I've been here long enough. Death's... Yeah, I think what I would do is not personify the death and start with the mom. I think those are my two suggestions. And, yeah. Okay, let's move on because I want to see how many people we can get to. We can go a little bit longer. I don't think we're going to get to everybody. Sorry. But let's see. Next we have Darlene Coleman. I am each moment, I am every single thing. We're going to try to move faster now. Faster, faster. I am each moment, I am every single thing. I am the scavenger who hunts in the wild. A chipped blue cup graces my Goodwill cart. Balanced on a frame and faded wedding photo, an army of green men at ease in a Ziploc bag rests in the arms of a sweater knit by a stranger. Salvation lies in these remnants of other lives, in stories borrowed from places I've never been. I am the keeper of matter banished to the curb, of elements jumbled on thrift store shelves or peeking from overloaded dumpster lids. I clutch memories caught in desire's web as every atom of us barrels toward the landfill. Well, interesting. So for this one, I like my favorite aspect of it are the specificity of the Army Green Men and the Ziploc bag, the chipped cut from the Goodwill cart. So those are the things that really stand out because of their details. I think those work really well. So I am each moment. I am every single thing. I am the scavenger who hunts in the wild. A chipped blue cup graces my Goodwill cart. Balanced on a frame and faded wedding photo. An army of green men at ease in a Ziploc bag rests in the arms of a sweater knit by a stranger. Salvation lies in these remnants of other lives. To me, the poem sort of loses some steam when it gets to the sort of the generalized, moralizing voice. It's good to have a turn in the poem, but it's not as strong as the rest, and it doesn't really feel as sort of profoundly surprising as like that kind of shift when it works best is done. Salvation lies in these remnants of other lives, in stories borrowed from places. So it's sort of like pulling back, but then, generalizing in that narrator voice in a way that loses, I think, some of the strength of the poem. Yeah, as Deb T says, I like the details, but not as engaged when interpreting what it means. Dick Western says, I'm looking for the poet in this one. I was hopeful starting with I am, but then I really can't find the I. And Lisa Seidenberg says, I want to know why this person is a scavenger. And so that's the thing too. So I am the scavenger who hunts in the wild, a chipped blue cup. So these are great details. And then instead of saying, I think another, again, I keep hearing a few times wanting repetition. If we came again, instead of shifting the voice and register right here to salvation lies and remnants, we're distancing ourselves. What if we jump back into I am the scavenger again? I am the scavenger who, and then let the poem run from there and keep focusing on describing that that main character that's in this poem, speaking this poem, so we get to understand them better. So here we get I am the keeper of matter banished to the curb, and that's great too. So I guess that's why I was thinking of repetition, because we have that sort of, syntactical repetition that works really well. And I think pushing on that and getting rid of this voice is the way to go with this poem. I am the keeper of matter banished to the curb, of elements jumbled on thrift store shelves. But again, instead of being the details, we have abstract, just elements jumbled on thrift store shelves or peeking. So we've come back to this I am the keeper, I am the scavenger, but we've come back to generalize about it. And I think instead of like pulling back and generalizing, zooming in and trying to really feel what that means, I think, is the way to go. Deb says, I like the idea of repeating I am the scavenger who, and then delving deeper each time. Yeah, exactly. And I clutch memories caught in desire's web. So see, we're abstracting as we get farther along the poem. Instead of getting more close to, why does this item, like find like a specific item that the scavenger picks up and what that meaning would be for this person. So we get even a more detailed and authentic sort of character sketch of this person as we sort of understand who they are. I think that's the direction to go. So it pulls out into the abstract when it really should be narrowing in and getting more personal. I think that's the way to go with this poem. Okay, let's move on because we're trying to be fast. Yeah, so as Mary Keating says, another way to put it what I just said, and it's nice to have people say similar things in different ways. So she says, I love the image of the army of green men, but the poem doesn't seem to go anywhere. And to me, going anywhere would be diving more into the personal, so we get more of an idea of who this person actually is, the I. Okay, let's go to the next one. And next we have Brian O'Sullivan, the Thai Tai Chi instructor speaks. It's Brian O'Sullivan. The Tai Chi instructor speaks. Here we go. There's a skinny guy in the corner of the room who, when he tries to grasp the sparrow's tail, looks like he's been impaled upon a rusty nail. He's got no grace, no spatial sense, no physical or spiritual flow. I have to say that I thought he was a little slow. I hear he does well in his academic classes, but there's something that you can't learn in classes, not even this one, that ability to be in the room, but not in your head. You know, he can't slow down time the way you have to do. He chases his own tail, watching the mirrors. He falls 3 steps behind. The spiritual rhythm can't come to him because he hasn't even got the body's part. I thought, you have got to be able to slow down, forget the books and classes, girls and daydreams, and just move. The spiritual truth will come when the body makes room, distracted like a dog whose tail wags on automatic when he's catching a frisbee. Just slow down, I want to tell this guy. Take it slow and find the flow. When you finally got it, then you'll have the sparrow by the tail. But if you're still thinking about books and classes when you're going through the motions in this room, then you're missing that place where the spiritual and physical come together. Spiritual truth's not found in books. It slowly comes with practice, if you make enough room for it. I have told him this, but he's always got such an anxious look. I avoid the kinds of clashes that tend to end with a student turning tail and running out in tears. Teaching entails, challenging, no doubt, and there's a kind of spiritual duty to make people uncomfortable. But in PE classes, students aren't expecting that kind of depth. His low self-esteem isn't my responsibility, and besides, I got from a former student who's in this guy's English class a copy of a tale he tells through the slow spiritual discipline of a poetic form, and how he got a taste of Tai Chi through this class. Maybe he learned a little in this room. Interesting. So Brian O'Sullivan says the original version of this sestina was from the perspective of the student, me, rather than the instructor. So that's interesting. So this is already what Brian's been working on for revising a poem. So the original version was from the perspective of the student. Yeah. Interesting. And so we see the sestina structure here, the N word, room, tail, got, spiritual, slow, classes. The one thing, and this might be an out of the, off the wall too much suggestion for this, but there's a way that this poem, as I was reading it, because of the way the pantoum moves, there's a kind of, what's called a mirror type poem. Oops, hang on a second. What is this one? I'm trying to find this. There's one, I can't remember the title though. It might be hard. There's a poem that, the kind of poem that you repeat the lines but in reverse order, going up and down. Is it this one? No. I can't find it, I don't think, fast enough. Oh, yeah. Well, plum blossoms sweep down like snow. And there was a way, given the transition, that it would be neat to have both of those perspectives, I was thinking. Even at the very beginning of the poem, I was thinking that. So there's this poem by Lynn Knight that's an example. And I don't know if we should read the whole thing, so I'm trying to go really quick. But, well, plum blossoms sweep down like snow. What you found is not what you sought. And it goes blah, blah, blah. Plead with him all you want. He's through. Your turn to decide what to do. Your turn to decide what to do. Plead with him all you want. He's through, he said, meaning never again. And so the poem goes like that. And it ends, what you found is not what you sought. So the poem mirrors itself, if you can see that. Just repeats the same thing in reverse order, but changing the syntax and stuff. And I know it's a sestina, but I think it'd be really cool to try to write the poem in that way. Because to me, the poem feels, I should say, too long. I think it feels like it's forced to be the length of a sestina, when really, yeah. And so Morgan Feeney says maybe a sonnet in here instead, shorter. Fady says I give it 3 stanzas tops. And I think that's why, to me, there was this interesting poem sort of hidden in there as I was reading it that popped up into my mind, where from one perspective we get the teacher's view, in the other going sort of in reverse order or something like that, and maybe looser than Lynn Knight's poem, we get the student's perspective. And so we sort of see that going back and forth in parallel. I like that idea. So it's just a kind of wild. It'd be hard to do, Brian. I'm sorry for suggesting that, but I could imagine a cool Sestina. Katie Doder says, let's see. Well, she's reminded Dick. So Dick says, I find the best Sestinas wander far from the opening theme. There's so much room to move, and if you don't, they feel wordy, as Mary opines. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. To me, it's sort of linger on the same place too much. It's a good way to put it. It just feels like it's too long for its own self. And so I think a mirror poem would be cool. That's a tough thing to ask you to do. Debsy says the teacher thinking the student isn't getting much from the class while the student experiences that they are. Yeah. Okay. Well, those are suggestions. We keep trying to move on fast, but thanks for sharing that, Brian. And next up, let's go to Paul Mitchell Bernstein, I believe. Right? That was Paul? Yeah, that's Paul. She comes heavy, hammer cocked. We'll do a couple more. How many do we have left? Well, we'll do a couple more. And my phone's like transcribing everything I say for some reason. I must have said some "Hey Google" or something a long time ago. That's kind of funny. Okay. Well, here he goes. She comes heavy, hammer cocked. Any more, you will not touch me. There'll be no harmonious redress. These rusty strings, they will not sing. They could not bear the stress. Anyway, why would you? My skin crawls at the thought of your caress. And for what, my love? An endless blue? An icy burn? A bloody mess? You hang like heavy fog on me. You roll in thick as I lie here half dreaming, scratching down these bricks, and I awake to the sound of you. I slide like metal and lock, stiff on the trigger, hammer cocked. But today I am a soldier, a weary warrior born of you, who are my greatest lover, who will not touch me anymore. So, interesting poem here, Paul. For this one, the random sort of suggestion that's popping into my head is making this a call and response type poem, where the one person's voice who, she comes heavy, hammer cocked, and then we have the other person, the you comes in to speak. And I think as a dialogue, that would be nice. Monica Doba says, I love the title. Yeah. I like the title too. She comes heavy, hammer cocked. But I could see two voices in this instead of one, and I think maybe I might go in that direction. Let's see. What else we say? Fade says, sounds like a romantic murder. She comes heavy, hammer cocked. Any more, you will not touch me. There'll be no harmonious redress. These rusty strings, they will not sing. They could not bear the stress. Then can't you hear a reply to that? I really can in my head. I can hear a reply. Anyway, why would you? And maybe it's the anyway and anymore. Morgan Fee says, I don't know what this is about at all. And I think that would add context too, if we'd know if we go back and forth. Anyway, why would you? My skin crawls at that thought of your caress. And for what? My love, an endless blue, an icy burn, a bloody mess. So I like the sounds in this. Dick Westheimer says these are great metaphors, but they're out of context of the actual specifics of the relationship. And yeah, and Cindy Guntherman says, I don't get this one. And yeah, I mean, I don't really get what's going on either. I mean, I like the sounds of it. I like there's a musicality to it, which Paul, usually has. An icy burn, a bloody mess. You hang like heavy fog on me. You roll in thick as I lie here, half dreaming, scratching down these bricks. And that rhyme, but there's also the rhythm of it is really nicely done too. There's a real song to it. But I think to me, if you got replies, I think we'd get more of the story, because I don't really understand the story. I don't know how literal to take these things. And I awake to the sound of you. I slide like metal and lock, stiff on the trigger, hammer cocked. But today I am a soldier, a wary warrior born of you, who are my greatest lover, who will not touch me anymore. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's my suggestion, Paul. And let's move on to another poem. I guess we'll have to do. Yeah, we'll do one more. And sorry, and to everybody too. If we didn't get to you, let me remind everybody that how I'm doing the critique of the week from now on is if I have like regulars whose names I recognize, I'm going to look through and put them ahead in the queue, so you'll get a faster response if you're regular. So too, if you're watching right now, submit like regular, but I'll keep an eye out for your name. And if not, I'm going to the oldest poems in the queue to try to catch up. But so if you have a poem here, we didn't get to it, just submit it and with another poem too. And then we'll get to it next week or the week after or something like that, okay? So feel free to do that as well because we just couldn't get to everybody. Here we go with Jenny Middleton. I'll put this in a Word doc just to be safe. But Jenny says, here's a poem that is an experiment with a duplex form when I learned about on Critique of the Week. Does this work? Thanks, Jenny. Okay. So the duplex form is interesting. It's a form I've never actually written in. We should probably do it for the prompt lines at some point to try it. And the duplex form is, I can't even remember. Oh yeah, that's so every other line. So the first, it's sort of ghazal-like. It's one of those ones where it's sort of new to me, so I have to remind myself every time what it is. And so, isn't it, maybe not pain. I thought, pain. What are the repetitions? Okay, let me look it up because I've totally spaced apparently. Duplex poem rules. Let's see. The first line is echoed in the last line. The second line of the poem. Let me see. Okay. A ghazal that is also a sonnet that is also a blues poem of 14 lines, giving each 9 to 11 syllables. The first line is echoed in the last line. The second line of the poem should change our impression of the first line in an unexpected way. The second line is echoed and becomes the third line. The fourth line of the poem should change the impression of the third line in an unexpected way. This is more complicated than I remember even. This continued until the penultimate line becomes the first line of the couplet that leads to the final and first line. Does this make any sense? I feel like I'm reading directions for like a new board game that you have no idea how to play, and no one is even listening to the one poor person who has to read and try to understand this thing. But anyway, so I've never really understood this poem or this form. The first line is echoed in the last line. The second line of the poem should change our impression of the first line, and then it's echoed to become the third line. So the gyre. Oh, that's right. Okay. Let me look at some examples of this form too. The original duplex is here by Jericho Brown. And he's the inventor of it. That's the only detail I really remember. A poem is a gesture toward home. It makes dark demands I call my own. Memory makes demands darker than my own. So it's like this is echoed here in the dark demands in my own. My last lover drove a burgundy car. My first love drove a burgundy car. Okay, so that's how we're going. So it's like interesting. Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, so that's how the duplex goes. And sorry for indulging me to remind myself how it works, but it's tough for me to remember that form. Okay, so behind us on the bus, the voices of a man and woman gyre around and then into and out of each other's pain. Pain is a gyre moving loop after wobbling loop through the jolting, screeching bus and out into the night, jolting and screeching into the night's thrum as the man stands up, full of threats, ready to leave, the rumble of his voice betraying his threats to shadows, pooling at his feet as he stands, wanting her to want him to stay. So she says stay, as if pulling her voice from a silent, hardening tar, although she just wants him to stop and not really to stay, weighing the night with a silent freight of parceled up, unwrapped accusations that we unwrapped once and parceled up into memory's freight, or put to sleep in marriage counselors' tidy files, filing away our accusations so that now we can no longer hear the voice of the man and the woman behind us on the bus. Interesting. Dick Westerman says this is not a duplex. And is that because, we got to do this for the prompt lines because I'm not going to understand it until I write one, really. But But the duplex is more than repeating sort of the gyre, the certain lines and entering into the next line. It's more than that. Is it like, so it's more Pantoum like, so it's a little close, they should be closer, is what you're saying, Dick? Okay. Well, anyway, conversation overheard on a London bus. I like the perspective, though, so it's hard to think of a way to shift that voice. Behind us on the bus, the voices of a man and woman gyre around and then into and out of each other's pain. I really like the opening a lot. Pain is a gyre moving loop after wobbling loop through the jolting, screeching bus and into the night. I love this line, too. I really like the start of this. I get a little lost, though. So Dick Westerman says it really needs more of the line before. Yeah, I think that's why I got confused, because it's really, really loose in a way that makes it hard to see, although you can see the repetition of like 2 or 3 words per each line. But it's like a super, super loose Pantoum. Yeah, so Dick says love the title too, and I do too. I like the beginning. Jolting and screeching into the night's thrum as the man stands up. And I think maybe... I think maybe the thing that too is that the jolting and screeching bus is also jolting and screeching again. It should be something different, jolting and screeching, like their voices are jolting and screeching or something. So it doesn't feel like it's shifting the meaning. As the man stands up, full of threats, ready to leave, the rumble of his voice betraying his threats to shadows, pooling at his feet as he stands, wanting her to want him to stay. I like that line too, wanting her to want him to stay. So she says stay, as if pulling her voice from silent, hardening tar, although she wants... And so the poem starts to just sort of feel labored a little bit to me. I like the beginning, and then it just sort of repeats itself in less interesting ways. It doesn't feel like it's moving forward. And I think maybe something has to happen sooner, or something different has to happen. So maybe that's the shift. Like, make something... more surprising happen around this part. Him to stay, so she says stay, as if pulling her voice from silent, hardening tar, although she just wants him to stop and not really to stay, weighing the night with a silent freight of parceled up, unwrapped accusations. See, I mean, they're just still sort of, arguing in this little circle, and we, I'm not feeling like the poem's moving forward at this point. That we enwrapped once and parceled into memory's freight, or put to sleep in marriage counselors' tidy files, filing away our accusations so that now we can no longer hear the voices of the man and woman. And I like where it goes, actually. I like swinging back. I think maybe, where's the transition? There's sort of a big sort of Volta-type leaping, turning moment, but I don't feel that turning. Yeah, so... weighing the night with a silent freight of parceled up, unwrapped accusations that we unwrapped once. Yeah, so here's the turn that we unwrapped once. I think the problem is the turn comes late. So if you think about it, this was like a combination of a villanelle and a Pantoum and a sonnet, I think it said, right? Is that what they said? Yeah, Pantoum, sonnet, and a guzzle. That's right. And so, and to me, it doesn't, the turn comes too late, sort of where it should come for us in a sonnet. And I'd maybe get to the we up here instead of right here. Because this is the part that's getting repetitive. And this is the part where it turns and becomes a little more interesting. So so move the shift to us and our memories of our own fights, in the marriage counselors and stuff. Get that up here so we can talk about that a little bit before we get to the, I think I really like swinging back to this, not being able to hear them anymore. So I think it's a nice structured poem. I think the turn just comes late, and it would feel a lot more full if we got to the turn earlier. Yeah, and as Deb T says, maybe making the transition clearer and sharper. It's sort of tried to sort of cleverly sneaks in. They unwrapped their accusations that we unwrapped once, and it's sort of, yeah. Aaron Sickler says, yeah, make the middle shift from noise to silence. And Fady says, if I have to consciously pay attention... Yeah, that's the thing. So the main thing that we do really on the critique is just listen to ourselves, paying attention to how hard it is and which spots that are working. And I think it's working really well these first 3 lines where we don't exactly know what's going on and we're learning. And then it gets repetitive and sort of dull, and then it picks up again at the end. And so that all I do is sort of just, if you could drag this up like you're doing a Photoshop on it and making this part of the image bigger, that would be good too. And so that's what I'd suggest for that. Pull up that, get us more of the, then it gives you room too for more of the Marriage Counselor's files. You can push into that thought a little more deeply. Yeah. Okay. So that's going to wrap up the critique. It's 22 minutes over time, but it was a fun one. And I really love doing the lightning rounds. Sorry if we didn't get to you. It took, just so you know, Jenny Middleton sent hers, oops, I didn't want to shut it. Jenny Middleton sent hers 14 minutes into the show. So, if you want to do the lightning round, you got to be within the first, 10 minutes to be sure you'll get there. That's how much time you have. The ones that came in half an hour in are just a little too late. But like I said, you can share these on the regular critique submissions. And if I see a name, that's like anybody here, Jerry Stephenson, Fady, Aaron Sickler, Mary Keating, Morgan Feeney, anybody who's commenting, I'll move you up and we'll do it sooner. So just don't feel like you have to wait 6 months if you're a regular on this. So there you go. Okay. Anyway, that's going to wrap up the critique of the week. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy workshopping your poems. Oops, I don't want that yet. I want to go like this. You want to go there. Okay. Anyway, you hope you have fun, revising poems for the prompt lines this week. That is the prompt once again, to take an old poem that wasn't quite working, revise it by shifting the perspective in some way. That's going to be the prompt for this week. We also have that revision as the topic on the Poetry Space this week with Katie Dozier. So you can find that. Where can you find that? I guess at the NFC Poetry Gallery or Katie Dozier, Katie_Dozier. Katie's Twitter handle has all the links. If you search for the Poetry Space on Spotify or iTunes or whatever, that'll come up. But that's going to be every Thursday we record a show, drop it every Friday. This week we talked about submissions from the submitter's perspective. We talked about why, pick which journals to go to, how much effort to put into cover letters, things like that. We were joined by Janine Hall Gailey, who was on Rattlecast a while ago, a great poet that we published a bunch, and some other people like Brian O'Sullivan was there, Tom Barlow was there, etc. So Bethany Jarmel was there as well, talking about submissions. So that was a fun show. If you want to find that, just go to a podcast catcher like iTunes or whatever and type into Poetry Space. But anyway, the point is, next week we're talking more about revision too, so that'll be fun. We sort of have a revision week at Rattle, which is not my strong suit, actually, with my own stuff. I should be better at revising. So that'll be a lot of fun. And this week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Michael Meyerhofer. And Michael's just a really wonderful writer across many genres. I remember when we published reviews, he was our best reviewer. He's a great poet with a lot of different interesting ways of approaching poems. They're always very clear, but he has different subject matter. His most recent book release, even though it's an older book, is What to Do If You're Buried Alive. That his publisher just released as a free ebook, so you can actually download the book yourself, which is really fun. He has other new books too. We'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff with Michael Meyerhofer. Then we'll get to the prompt lines with those revision poems. Looking forward to that. Rattlecast number 234, Monday, February 26th. The regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.